Welcome back to the Inside Connection podcast, powered by MetaConnect Insurance. I am Sean Horn. He is Lance O'Brien, and for the first few episodes, when we introduced ourselves to this new audience, we talked a lot about some of the laws and regulations, some of the changes that are happening. Medicare did some brief introductions as to who we are, but today we're going to talk a lot about a subject matter that everybody who's either on Medicare or approaching Medicare can really rally around, and that's how to avoid the big mistakes that we see all the time related to Medicare. So, as we unravel this episode, I think we should start off by talking about why we're even here from a necessity standpoint. I mean, we're talking about a huge amount of people that are impacted by the information we're putting out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So mistakes unfortunately happen, but they can also be avoided, right?
Correct.
And why are there so many mistakes? I think two reasons. One, there's just a mass of people. Next 2 years alone, 1.5 million people each year, the largest in history, are going to become eligible for Medicare for the first time. So just a staggering amount of numbers, right? And then almost as staggering is the amount of information and misinformation out there, and the fact that Medicare isn't one way to sign up, one way to do this, one way to do that. It is always this one rule, but then a second rule, and then a third rule, and a different rule, and there's just so many layers. I think is probably the best way to say it. There's so many layers that somebody can be affected by when they go to get on Medicare. So a ton of people, ton of rules.
And the rules are ever changing as well. As we just come to find in the last year or so, there's a new rule out there that if you have less than 20 employees or colleagues that you work alongside at your company, that could push you into needing you to enroll into Medicare once you're eligible. I mean, there's so much that is constantly happening, which again, why we're proud to have this platform and really educate people down to what it is that they need to do.
Yeah, and I think you hit on the important word. Why this matters to us is it's not about sales or selling policies or anything like that, right? What I've found in all the years I've been doing this is that if you give people great information and you build relationship with them where they know that you're going to be with them as they go through the journey, because the first decision is the most important one.
It is.
But it's not the only one that they're
Right.
going to make, right? But if you give them great information and you really get them to the place, and I'm really passionate about this, you get them to the place to make an informed decision.
Yep.
I can't tell you, and again, you probably know, people come to us all the time, just tell me what to do. And actually, I don't want to do that.
Nope.
I want to give you the information so you're confident in what you're going to do.
So it's a niche that we operate within. Not everybody needs Medicare at this moment, although like you just mentioned a moment ago, the number is staggering in a growth pattern, if you will. So, we want to talk about the fact that how we can avoid some of these bigger mistakes. And there's a lot of them out there that we have to unravel, like we talked about a moment ago. And really, I want to start off by talking about the biggest one that we probably face daily, which is, do I even need Medicare? When do I need to enroll? How do I enroll? I'm currently working. Do I even need to, listen to you guys talk right now? And I'm working beyond the age of 65. And really, we're seeing a lot of that now because
Right.
more and more people are working beyond the age of 65. So, let's talk about that for a moment, because I know this is one we face constantly.
Yeah, over 100 seminars every year, right? Not to mention all of the people that we meet with one-on-one. And I'm turning 65. Do I need to sign up for Medicare? And the answer is, it depends, right? It's not yes, it's not no.
Oh.
But then the follow-up question a lot of times is, I heard if I don't, I'm going to get a penalty.
Yep.
And the answer again is, it depends on your scenario. So what are the rules that kind of surround this and helping people avoid mistakes, Sean?
Okay, so the biggest one I think that we have to talk about first is the fact of creditable coverage. That is a buzzword inside of Medicare when you're, looking at it for the first time, especially because in order to maintain creditable coverage, that is, coverage is at least as good as what Medicare has to offer. In order to maintain that, you have to be actively employed or covered by somebody who is.
Okay.
So, COBRA, not creditable coverage.
Right.
Oftentimes, retiree benefits, Not creditable. And the problem there, Lance, is that if you're not on creditable coverage and you blow past your initial enrollment period of getting on a Medicare when the government thinks you should, you're going to start accumulating penalties. And unfortunately, like we tell everybody that attends our seminars or listens in on our radio show or what have you, the penalties only go away when you do. They are everlasting, unfortunately.
Yeah, I got a call like a week ago from a couple, and they were in the school systems,
Okay.
right? So they got a buyout, which sometimes happens,
Yeah.
and they had coverage extending. And I got a lump in my throat when she first started talking. She was like, "We're 68 and 69, and we've been on my retirement coverage since then." And the first question I asked is, at age 65, did you get Part B? And thankfully, she did answer yes. She didn't make the mistake we see most people make,
Right.
which is, I've got coverage. Even though I'm retired, why do I need Medicare? And they don't enroll in Part B at age 65, even though they're retired. And that's when that penalty kicks in. But it's not just that goes into determining it, right? The type of insurance that someone has can impact whether they should get Medicare or not, correct?
Correct. Yeah. Health savings account, for example. And they're becoming more and more popular as we go along because it's more affordable for the company, oftentimes more affordable for the employee as well.
Yep.
There's some tax benefits involved there.
Absolutely.
And if you're not a high utilizer of your health care, you're going to save money. And, but if you don't have enough of a window between ending your health savings account or contributing towards it and getting on to Medicare Part A, you will face a penalty as well.
Right.
And, we're not even talking about the Medicare Part D penalty that, can often, and we'll get into that in the next segment a little bit more, but there are so many different ways that you could unfortunately make a mistake unbeknownst to you that it really makes sense to, get in contact with us, come to a seminar, get your individual consultation. We could do so over the phone or in person to make sure that you are not accumulating these penalties. Because like we said a moment ago, they just don't go away.
Yeah, and I think this is what I found the easiest way to say this. When you turn 65, don't assume you have to sign up for Medicare.
Right.
Don't assume that you don't have to,
Correct.
right? Because I've seen people sign up for it when they were actively working, had that creditable coverage that you're talking about. Now they're paying every single month a certain amount of money they don't even need to be spending. I've seen people do it the other way. So biggest way to avoid the mistake number one, don't assume. When you turn 64, what I'll do, even though I know all of this, I'll start walking down through the channel of what are my options. I want to understand my timeline. I want to understand the budget issues related to Medicare. Don't make the assumption that you do or you don't. That'll be the biggest way that you avoid making this most common mistake.
And then there's the other aspects too, quickly, that again, if you're working somewhere where there's 20 or less employees, you now have to get on to Medicare once you're eligible to avoid a penalty. And also, if you're of age to get on to Medicare and you work at the United States Postal Service, you also have to get on to Medicare, even though there's thousands, if not millions of employees there. So, there's a lot of nuances to all of this that, again, this is all very confusing and we're well understanding of that. But we can really simplify this down and make sure that you're not impacted negatively. But I think we also need to spend a few moments to talk about the fact that people do make mistakes in going straight to the insurance company and enrolling. Why?
Yeah, so I think a couple of reasons. I think the number one reason people do it is because we're creatures of habit.
Yeah.
Right? Like during their working years, they've had X company all their life, or a majority of your life, if you will. Now, again, a lot of HR departments are shopping or whatnot more often. So we're seeing more changes in the provider, of the insurance provider within group coverage. I think the other thing is maybe they use a doctor or a hospital system. And because of that, they choose to say, well, I'm just going to call this carrier directly. I've always used them, or these are my doctors. This is what I want to do. And again, we had somebody recently attend one of our seminars. And while attending the seminar, he was speaking to the presenter that night and said, well, I was just going to call this company, right? And long story short, he actually still, when he went through the entire process, went to the seminar, did an individual appointment, we ran all his medications, checked all his doctors, he did still end up going with the company he thought he was going to go with.
Mm-hmm.
But his statement was, I'm so glad that I called because now I know that this was the right option. And when someone calls the carrier directly, Sean, what's generally going to happen?
Well, the insurance company can only talk about their plans.
Right.
So, here in Allegheny County and the surrounding communities, we have almost 70 plans to take a look at. And they're all going to cover medications differently, cover different doctors and networks. And, some of them have a little bit loose or, travel benefits available and extra dental and so forth inside their plan. So, there's a puzzle that you need to put together, cater to your particular situation. And if you really go just to one plan or one company and say, hey, what do I need to do here? You're really missing out on all the competitiveness that's really in our market that is really driving prices down and extending coverage out, which, we're passionate about making sure that you don't overspend by a dollar on what you need in your insurance related to Medicare. So, you got to take a look at that so you only have the bias of one plan choice available to you. And really, they're not going to tell you if your medications are going to be covered with a competitor in a more advantageous manner. They're just going to sign you up because that's their job.
Yeah. So if there's 60, 70 plans in one county, let's say, right? And they go to carrier that has 10 of those, they're literally getting one small slice of the pie.
Yeah.
Right. And they're going to say, well, this is the plan in our suite of plans that covers you the best,
Yeah.
but it might not necessarily be the best. And the other reason why I think it's an issue also is there's two types of private insurance that people can get when they get Medicare, right?
Yeah.
They can get a Medicare supplement plan, or otherwise known as a Medigap, or they can get an Advantage plan. Not every carrier actually does both types of those coverages.
Very true.
So if you call a company that only does Medicare Advantage, you're only going to hear about Medicare Advantage where a supplement might be more important to you. And then one other thing I'll say really quickly is somebody comes on to one of these plans for the first time, they do their due diligence. I think they can still make the mistake by maintaining loyalty to one specific carrier. And what I mean by that specifically over the last 3-4 years is these plans have changed monumentally, right? And I think it's a mistake to not only just call the carrier directly, but just stick with that carrier through the process of time. I always believe number one loyalty should be to an individual's self.
Yeah.
And how their health changes and looking out for how they can get the best coverage for them.
Look, I'll put it very simply. My own parents are on Medicare, clients of our office, of course.
Good example.
They've been on Medicare almost 5 years now, and they've been on a different plan each and every year that caters to their needs the best. So, we as an insurance agency, if you will, we would like people to stay on plans in perpetuity because the renewal dollar, which we'll talk about in future episodes, but it actually makes more financial sense to leave you go. But here, we want to make sure that the clientele is benefiting the most advantageous way possible for their needs. So the phone number on the screen there, call at any time to get the answers that you do deserve, or you can also go to mediconnectinsurance.com and check us out there.
Medicare is confusing and a little scary.
Plan B, Part B,
HMO, PPO. I feel lost.
Whether you're just starting Medicare or currently on Medicare, you're faced with critical decisions each year. Questions like, do I need a Medicare plan? Is my current coverage still my best option? Will I still be able to see my doctors? I'm Brian Breisinger with MediConnect, the area's premier independent healthcare advisory firm. We can help avoid costly pitfalls today and in the future. We can meet with you in person or over the phone. Choose an expert in your community.
MediConnect walked us through everything.
Best of all, it didn't cost us anything.
That's right. Our licensed experts can offer unbiased advice on all of your healthcare options at no cost to you.
MediConnect is a great organization.
MediConnect, bridging the healthcare gap. For no-cost advice, call 888-818-MEDI or go to mediconnectinsurance.com.
And welcome back to the Inside Connection podcast, powered by MediConnect. I'm Lance O'Brien. This is Sean Horn, and we're going to continue talking about mistakes. No one likes to talk about mistakes or making mistakes, but that's how we avoid them sometimes, right? So we got a couple more in this segment. Before we do that, we do want to recap. In the first session or the first segment today, we talked about the importance of not assuming when you turn 65 or when you're getting ready to go on to Medicare, eligible for Medicare the first time, that you shouldn't get A and B, or you should get A and B. You want to make sure you review. And one of the things that I think we want to just circle back to really quickly there is the importance of actually comparing group coverage.
Yeah, I think you actually have said it best many times on our local radio program on, KDK radio on Saturdays, that, there's a certainty about group coverage. It's either really good and you don't need to get on Medicare, or now maybe not so good. There's not so much of a gray area anymore. You're going to either have really strong benefits or benefits that actually are not going to compare favorably to Medicare, especially those of you who have deductibles attached to your plan, $1,000, $2,000 yearly deductible and up. You're probably going to do a little bit better getting onto Medicare, because many of the plans, number one, don't have deductibles. Beyond that, the coverage is oftentimes far, again, more advantageous or cost effective by network, by proximity and benefits as well. So I think just because you have group coverage and group benefits available to you, that doesn't mean that has to be your answer. And it's also worth noting that once you're eligible for Medicare, you can drop the group coverage, eligible by age.
Right.
You can drop the group coverage whenever you want and enroll onto Medicare. So it could be in the middle of the year, the beginning of the year. Whenever you find as though Medicare might benefit you more, you can enroll very quickly.
Yeah, for sure. And Sean, I don't run very many appointments anymore.
Right.
But my daughter started in the industry a couple years ago. So every once in a while, she'll see something she's never seen before. And she'll ask, hey, can I bounce some stuff off you? Can I show you something? So she had set me a plan that someone had in the past week. And the situation there is turning 65 in November, right? Wife is going to keep working on his wife's benefits. And lo and behold, we walk through premium, deductible, copay structure, and maximum out of pocket. Premium was about the same, but it was actually going to be way more advantageous for him to go to Medicare from a benefit standpoint. And when it was all over, they were like, well, this really is a no-brainer, right? And that's one of the things. Cost comparison is really important, benefit comparison. And we like to do that apples to apples again so they can make the best decision.
As well as prescription drug coverage, which we're going to talk about next, right? We're seeing a lot of movement there where the group plan and the group benefits through your employer might not offer you the highest level of drug coverage available. And oftentimes we're seeing Medicare, again, striking a chord with a lot of folks that we help. So, talking about that a little bit more as we dive into that, that is an area where we see a lot of opportunity for messing up your decision. And really, that's why we start there when we consult with our clientele and people who engage with us. So let's talk about that a little bit. The prescription drug coverage of Medicare. How can we make mistakes there?
Well, first of all is by thinking you don't need drug coverage.
That's a
right?
big one.
By thinking you don't need it if you don't take prescriptions, right? If you don't take prescriptions, Sean, you still have to get prescription coverage, correct?
You do, because you will be penalized if not. And again, that penalty only goes away when, the beneficiary does. So it's worth spending some time, even if you don't take any medications currently. You really still want to plan for prescription drug coverage whenever you are eligible for Medicare, because the way that the government looks at it is it's a area where they can accumulate more money from the Medicare member.
Right.
So it costs the government money to offer this type of coverage, the prescription drug element of it. But if you don't have it, there's an area where they can get more money from people because they weren't proactive in picking a plan. And oftentimes, especially when you're looking at Medicare Advantage plans, it's already included in the coverage. So it's not going to cost you anything extra if that's the private insurance entity that you offer or go towards, I should say. Medigap, you do have to get a separate drug plan oftentimes, but there's other things to take into consideration with that. If you are eligible for financial assistance, you may not need to go through that. And again, these are things that we can break down for you on an individual basis so that you're not making that mistake.
Yeah, I think research is key, right? Once you know you have to have a plan, then it's How do my prescriptions work? I think it's a mistake not to understand formularies and
Big
tiering
one,
systems,
big
right?
one.
You know, not to understand stages of the drug coverage, which we help people with, right? So not understanding that there is financial assistance available out there for individuals, right? So I think that there's a lot of mistakes that can be made. And I think when it comes to drugs, research is the big one. I just have a lot of stories, and you make the scripts, I don't, right? But and you do a great job with it. I have a story that fits with this because, again, my daughter had been reached out. She's been doing really good working with people, but she got a referral from someone who has HOP. Didn't understand HOP. Long story short, both of the individuals that she was meeting with had drug coverage or drug prescriptions that they took were just ridiculous, honestly.
Very
We're talking
expensive.
very expensive. We're talking between the two individuals, we had 4 inhalers in play.
Oh.
We had 2 type 2 diabetic insulins, and we had Humira. So they were thinking, we're not going to stay with the insurance that we got available through our employer, right? When it was all said and done, they still have a lot more research to do because they got to go back and look how the provider from their group coverage covers them. So they really have a lot of work, but now they know how important the research is for their situation.
Yeah, I mean, let's go back a couple years. This has been a couple years running now where a very popular prescription, gabapentin, has been all over the formulary tables by company.
Yes.
So some companies in our region here, it might be a tier 1 or tier 2. Other companies will offer it as a tier 3 drug. And, you know, there's going to be a wide cost variance between those different options available to you. And again, if you go straight to the insurance company and they're one of the companies that have it as a tier 3, you're going to pay more when you don't need to. And
Yes.
that, you know, it's almost criminal in that aspect. Plus, it's worth noting there is a massive difference between a standard pharmacy and a preferred pharmacy. We
Yes.
see mistakes with that all the time where, you know, people want to stay with their neighborhood druggist that
Mom and pop. Yep.
they've had the long-standing relationship with, and we totally understand that. We wish that more and more could subscribe as preferred pharmacies, unfortunately, but oftentimes these preferred pharmacies are going to save you tremendous amounts of money in copays when you go to pick up your medication.
Absolutely. I mean, I've seen people that can go from, because again, there's some formularies out there where tier 1 is 0 at a preferred pharmacy, 15 at a standard pharmacy. So if you have 5 drugs, you could go from paying $0 to $90. You don't make the mistake of thinking, and again, you may like a certain pharmacy, but it's worth it to make sure that you're aligned in your plan. And again, we do a lot of this research for you. The couple I mentioned before, they had to go to their employer, get the information from them, and then we're going to help them finalize that. But there's a lot of mistakes, not getting a drug plan, not knowing preferred pharmacies, not understanding tiers, and not all formularies are made equal, right? So
That's true.
big issues there. So what's another common mistake that we see people make?
So I would say that it's a newly developed one, and that's not knowing how to utilize programs like GoodRx or Cost Plus Drugs, the Mark Cuban online pharmacy.
Yes.
We're seeing a lot of savings through programs like these that we can, you know, help people navigate, which again, these are new programs that are available. They're kind of hard to understand at first, but once you get acclimated and comfortable with them, these are things that can really go a long way towards helping you save on prescription costs. And also some of the medications that you're going to get that you don't run in through insurance are going to help push off that dreaded donut hole as well. So just some things to consider. And again, what we can help you navigate. But I think I want to spend a few moments to talk about one last huge mistake that we're seeing a little bit more in the last 2 to 3 years. And that is calling the phone number on the commercials of the athlete and Hollywood actor from years ago. So Joe Namath and George Foreman and so on and so forth.
Shatner, beam me up.
Beam you up, absolutely.
Don't beam me up to Medicare, though.
No, definitely not. So when you see that Medicare flag waving in the back and there's that celebrity and they're telling you to call because they have free this, free that, when they make that phone call, what happens to them? Let's talk about that. I think that's a big one that people should be aware of.
Yeah, first thing they need to know is that's a marketing company, right?
Correct.
It's not a Medicare company, right? It's a marketing company.
Okay.
So all they're trying to do is get people up to pick up the phone, and then they're going to route it to a company that's going to talk to them about Medicare. Many times it's routed, to a national call center.
Okay.
Why that word national call center is important is because generally those national call centers only work with national carriers.
Huh.
And
So you mean that companies like Highmark and UPMC are off the table to the people who call into that phone number?
that's huge for us here in the state of Pennsylvania, especially Western PA, because if they call and talk to them, it's going to be the national players, the Cignas, the Humanas, the Aetnas, the UHCs, United Healthcares of the world. It's not going to be the regional carriers. And because they're in a national call center somewhere, they don't know what's happening in the locale. They don't know the hospital system.
Right.
They're basically relying on a screen to make decisions, right? And frankly, if I'm being really honest, they don't always check the doctors and medications thoroughly. So understand, those commercials are national marketers driving people to national call centers.
That's a mouthful.
It is, and it was difficult to get out.
But also beyond that, here's another thing for the beneficiary, right? This is major. When you make that phone call, you now have landed on the internet when it comes to, hey, I need help. And when that happens, unfortunately, your phone is going to ring off the hook. Your email is going to blow up. They're going to mail you things all the time. And the one of the biggest complaints that we get from people is, why do they send us all this information? We have gone into how many homes where the kitchen table is stacked up with information and it just keeps coming and coming. So if you want more of that, go ahead and call Joe Namath. He'll be happy to send all that information out to you. And again, make things more confusing. Where here at MediConnect, we are in position to make Medicare simple for each and every person who engages with us. So, as we wrap up this episode here, as we, talking about all the Medicare mistakes, again, just a real quick recap. Number one, you need to determine on your own accord, is Medicare needed for your particular situation, even if you're continuing to work. So that's the first one. We also need to talk about the prescription drug coverage. That's a big one that we oftentimes do, come across and try to help people navigate through. Again, talking about these national call centers as well. We help everybody avoid all of that mess.
Yeah, and avoid calling the carrier directly. Again, that's not a knock against the carriers. We have great carriers, right? But you're limiting yourself, right? And then don't give into the tyranny of marketing.
Yeah.
Because if you do, you're going to get a target on your back, and you're not going to want that. So again, 888-818-6334, MediConnect, MediConnectInsurance.com. You can connect with us. We want people to be educated to make great decisions, not mistakes.
Thank you for joining us this week. Look forward to talking to you in the near future about more exciting Medicare information.